So he's from North Philly. We found our home in North Philly. And I think 3 years later, I got a job. I continued to, I graduated with a degree in graphic design and a sub-degree in teaching, art education. I was fortunate enough to be able to pursue my graphic design career in New York and then in Philly. When I got here, I happened upon a test for the city, and I had been doing freelance work at various, like one of them was a magazine at University of Penn and Lapidary Journal, and I was actually at the Franklin Institute when the library called me for an interview. So my career of 28 years was at the Free Library of Philadelphia in their design studio, ending as the design studio supervisor. So I was around books, you know, and I always enjoyed reading, you know, myself. So I loved being at the library. I was, you know, I was surrounded by books and book people all the time. And so it was my job, and it was my job to engage people through graphics to make them interested in a subject or whatever. We did the exhibits that were in the lobby, you know, and we promoted the programs. So I did that. And then in 2008, you know, I guess I always had a desire to have my own business. In 2008, I think I started, my husband was a teacher, and he introduced me to a catalog of books from this company called Daedalus. And Daedalus is in Baltimore, or near Maryland, near Baltimore. And they had these fabulous books at discount prices and great children's books. And so when I saw that, and I don't know, something clicked, and I said, one thing I knew was that books, children came to the library, and libraries were promoted to children, but they needed to have their own books. I knew that just from I had my child by then, and my daughter, and just reading to her as a baby excited her and motivated her to want to read herself. And I saw all the stages of creating a reader, essentially, you know. And so I said, but these books, these beautiful books, and that's a lot of how I choose my books is through the aesthetic. If I don't like the cover, if the cover doesn't grab me and I don't like the illustration, I don't even bother to look further to say, you know, to see what this book is about. And that's even with the books, even with when I'm looking for books about Black people or people of color in general. So I saw this catalog, and I said, wow, I'm going to buy these books and start vending. And I started vending in Uhuru Flea Market in West Philly, Clark Park. And so I would drag the books out and on, you know, whenever they had their flea market, and maybe do some other off sales. And at first I just picked any book. You know, I picked books that, you know, about animals, house, anything, and sold them. And then I honed my collection to just be primarily about people of color, and primarily Black Americans. So I guess in nearing my thinking about retirement, and had decided I was gonna retire in 2017, 18. And I happened to come around, my husband, ironically, didn't drive, but he knew almost every part of Philadelphia. He didn't drive, and then so we would go everywhere, you know, Germantown, South Philly, West Philly. Anyway, he was asked. He's head of the Philadelphia Jazz Project, and he was asked to have an interview with one of the jazz musicians at Germantown Radio. So I said, oh yeah, I'll go with you, sure. And when I came and saw the block, it was like I was kind of, like I said, I was in a transition thinking about what I was going to do when I retired. Tired of lugging books. Books is probably the worst thing to vend because they're so heavy. Tired of lugging books and hooking up my little display. And I saw that the shop in the mall was for rent. And ironically, it was the Black Writers Museum, which is now in Burnham Park. And so I had to do a little bit of work to figure out, to get in touch with the realtor. I did. And so that's how I ended up in Maplewood Mall. And it was 2 years before I retired. And I say to people that, you know, had I not done that while I was working full time and setting up my shop and trying to have it open, I probably wouldn't have done it after I retired. I would have been like, oh man, I'm retired. I'll just keep vending. So, so then I was working over the 5 years, I was there 5 years before I had to close. I was going into my 6th year this year. And I, just met people, honed it. I tried various things. I had a campaign for home libraries where I would give out a coupon and encourage people to come and get a book for like half price or so. And I engaged with daycare centers. So we did, 1 year I had a series of story times with daycare homeschoolers, whereby I had collaborators who did some, nice little story times on Wednesday for like a half hour. And yeah, just try things to engage the community, to just get people to understand the importance of literature. And that's kind of what the grid that's my goal, is just to get books into the homes of children. And the other reason why my books, I don't go through publishers. I purchase books myself at a discount so that I can pass those savings on. I'm in the fortunate position that this is not my livelihood. I do not need this to keep a roof over my head, and so I try to pass those savings on to my customers, because to me it's it's real important that these books are in the homes of children. The quality books are expensive, and especially in these times. I mean, it was always this way, but these times in particular, a book is not anything that a family is thinking about right about now. But at the same time, it's real important right about now, when your kids have to be at home and they need to be engaged in activities that feed their minds. I watch a lot of TV. I do. I'm not gonna say that I don't, but I also have options. I have options, and so that's important. So my my goal now, or I shouldn't say it's not necessarily a goal, but I like when what has been happening is folks have been buying books for uh, or organizations have been buying books, or folks have been buying books for organizations to give to larger amounts of children. Yeah, I recently went to a treehouse, which ironically is right around the corner from me. But I didn't engage them in a relationship until I was at Maplewood Mall. And there's an organization called One House at a Time, OHAT, and they give beds and books and pajamas to children without. And so they recently engaged me in a campaign where people will buy what I've labeled surprise packages. And a surprise package is just a way that I can move some of my inventory without you knowing what you're going to get, basically. So you tell me who you want the gift for, and then I will put a nice little package together of books for the person in that age book. They're going to be about a person of color, and they're going to be quality. And another organization, and I give to the Vernon Park Little Free Library. I have a relationship with Angela Miles, and we've done a little bartering, and also folks from the community have bought sets of books to put into the Little Free Library.
Can I interject?
That's my story, and that's what I'm doing. You have a question?
Yeah, I was curious about the surprise packages, and I understand you tend to do things with groups, but when, and I don't know how flexible you are with different structures of those, but generally if someone does that, are you talking about monthly or quarterly or one time or what?
Well, a customer recently, they bought 3 $35 surprise packages for me to send to a friend who has, they asked for 3 adult surprise packages. And I reached out to the friend. She said, oh yeah, reach out to him and see what he's interested in, because I always like to know, what the person is interested in. And they, when I reached out to him, he said, yes, I have. Can you include some children's books? I have a little, I think a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old. And so I said, yeah, sure. So I included some books for him, his interest, and the 3-year-old. She asked that I send it in September, October, November. Okay. Or October, November, and December. And so I did. So you can create your own subscription in that way. Or you can I can do a one-shot deal and you can tell me what to do. Or people buy multiple packages and send them all to to an organization. Recently did a big sale that I'll be delivering to a gentleman, I guess. I don't know if it's a man or a woman. He didn't give me details, but I'll be delivering books to him that he's going to separate into 3 packages for organizations that he wants to give to. So yeah, it's like you can ask me to craft something, put together something for you specific.
very customizable.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And so I'm just, I'm going to continue to do this. I was honored by Black Lives Matter. They just out of the blue said, wow, you've been doing this in the community for all these years. And they gave me a small, they gave me a little grant. Another publishing group gave me a grant. And so this COVID is a blessing in only that for my business, in that I don't have the overhead any longer. So a lot of it wasn't easy because the margins on books are not that great. And also I was even in the shop trying to I've always tried to apply, a discount. And so I wasn't making a lot of money. I was a lot of keeping the bookshop afloat came out of my pocket. And so that's one of the things that, like, shutting down. Emotionally, I knew I probably should have come to that decision earlier, but emotionally, and like I was saying in the beginning, just engaging with the community and the community, even just the people on the block, was something that I had that, I loved. That brought me joy. So I maybe should have closed down a year before, but I hung in there and would have probably continued to hang in there even with if COVID hadn't come along. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I know that one advantage of the child having the book in the house and keeping the book in the house is to have it reread over and over again. And I forget, it might have been Temple did a study, compared two libraries, Chestnut Hill Free Library and one in a poor neighborhood. And they found that in the lower income neighborhood, the child would bring a book to the parent and the parent would say, "Oh, we already read this, put it back." Instead of, reading it 50 times until it's memorized. And then that's, sort of how they get into.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. And that's how they learn to read. When their child is young and you're reading to them, they like the repetition. And that's how they learn their vocabulary and sounding out words and so forth. But no, it's real important. And the studies have shown that children with libraries, children with parents that read in their home, in their homes, regardless of what the economic, socioeconomic place that the parents are in, they're going to do better. They're going to move up in their lives. And there's a quote that I use from Maya Angelou, and she says that any book that you give to a child is good for them. That's like that goes along with, we've already read it. It doesn't, sometimes customers would, fuss about, well, not fuss, but they wanted it to be a more recent, maybe a more recent title, or something that they heard about that I may not have, had right then, or something that was just so specific, too specific maybe sometimes. and just wouldn't, you know, and just wouldn't just get a book. Well, let's try this one, you know. And then that was the other thing. And then sometimes parents would let the child who has no interest in reading is not going to find something to read. You know, it's not going to find anything to read. But at the same time, wasn't a lot of that. At the same time, I also felt like a place that people, children in particular, could come in and see themselves in everything, in all the products that was there, was valuable. And that was the other reason why I had a brick and mortar. And that's another reason why, you know, that's another disappointment in not being able to have that in the community. And I think Germantown was probably one of the best communities to have something like that, to have chosen. You know, there was a reason why I was drawn to that space, not being familiar with the community, you know. So, yeah.
I have a quick question. Have you been able to work with any of the independent schools? Because right now I'm sub-teaching for an independent school, and everything is virtual at this point in Philadelphia. But I know before that time, you know, I'd go into schools and a lot of them didn't have libraries. So I was wondering if you were able to make any kind of connections with any of the.
I did. I had a really, and still do, with Waldorf. Waldorf. I don't, you know, I guess what I'm going to say is that they are there. It wasn't so much about the reading, because they have their program is very progressive and a good program for reading, but they wanted to, it was the children of color, the Black aspect of it, you know, so I did pop-ups there, and I would sell books there. And then they also, the teachers would put together a list of books, and also asked me to recommend some books for them, for their kids to read. So over the last 3 years, through their parent association, I had a really good relationship with them. Green Street Friends, which was like right across the way from the shop, I did some collaborations with them. Yeah. But that was it.
Have you done any, this is Nancy Anderson. I was in your shop a couple of times while you still had it, and I enjoyed it a lot.
Thank you.
Have you done any collaborating with any of the public elementary schools in Germantown?
No.
Yeah. They could use it.
Yeah.
The ones that are still open.
Yeah, no, I didn't. At one point, like with the home library situation, I reached out to the political to see if I could get some support to print up these coupons, so that when the child, you know, to give out to their constituents, and just to be able to purchase inventory, and there was little interest. Let's put it that way. There's little interest. Yeah.
You know, the kids are really in a tough situation between all the years. I mean, if you had all the resources, the schools had libraries and the free library was open, which it hasn't been since March, and the bookstores with affordable things available, all that together would be the beautiful picture that would bring, a generation of children loving benefiting, and academically in those awful tests, but, for the love of it, to carry them. And I remember I was in a group of teachers working on standards for humanities, and we got everything down to this very dry list of things that kids should know and be able to do. And I took our product up to my aunt in Albany, who was a retired English teacher, and showed this to her proudly. She read through page after page after page, and she looked up and she said, "Where is the joy?" That's what's being pounded out of children, or has been, with the tests.
Right.
It's true. It's true.
So
I would like to know what you're doing right now. Do you have a website? Do you have any lists of books that you could suggest, since it's holiday time, Kwanzaa, Christmas, birthdays? There's so much that people don't really know. Often they need suggestions. Just as you were saying, people could say to you a child's age, and you would make up a group of books. Are you still doing that? I guess that's what I want to know.
Yeah, yes, I am. I have a website, and this is one of the things that's been in terms of the transition. There's a whole lot of work, and even after you get a website going, just the consistency of putting out information can be overwhelming. But in any case, yeah, so the surprise packages, that's what I suggest when people need suggestions, is ask for a surprise package, pick the price point and age group you want, and give me some information about what the child's interests are. And my website is booksandstuff.info, and it's spelled all out, books and stuff, and it's .info. Yeah. And on the website, I always have some selections, about 40 books in all categories. But if you don't see something there that's of interest to you, then I can put something together. Or if it's a specific book, I can get a specific title, too. I put together, this is a challenge for me, is being able to, I can't invest in purchasing books before I know how many I'm going to sell. So the challenge was I put out a list of holiday suggestions in October that I needed to know in by November, early November, whether, you know, what a person's order was, so that I can then purchase the amount that I needed. But, and I did buy some of them, but a lot of that's, you know, I did sell. I can send you a list. I sent that by email. So if you were to provide me with a list of email addresses, I can forward that to you. And if you see something on there that you're interested in, I can see if I can still get it. Because now we're getting, you know, into the holidays. I had bought some of the Barack Obama book, A Promised Land, which is a big seller right now. And I actually sold all that I had. I'm looking around because I'm in my office, which is a mess and has books. But anyway,
I can relate to that.
I may be able to get some of those. But the other thing is, I don't like to, especially around a holiday, I don't like to promise you something that I don't have, you know, that I don't have right now, and I may not be able to get it to you in time for Christmas, between the mail and, yeah, just being able.
But you can still do the surprise packages, right,
I
Lynn?
still do surprise packages, and
Right.
that's with the inventory I have on hand. Yeah.
Yeah, and I always think you can always notify a person, this is the gift, and it'll start in January or something like that, to just avoid that whole timing issue.
That's true too.
I was thinking of Barack's book because, you know, of course, that's something I want to have in hand. And if I can buy it from someone independent, and I thought, oh, let me not be so common, but I was so glad you mentioned it.
Yeah, that I think I have one copy left, but I may be able to get more of that. I use a service, and this that I learned about through the library, and it's called Bookazine. You have to be a library or a store or something to buy books from them at a discount. But they have some of the more up-to-date titles. The other places that I go to, they have more out of a little older titles, not, you know, not that old, but older titles that people who are into books would probably already have them, would have already gotten them. But yeah, it doesn't, a book is a good book, whether it was written this past month or a couple of years ago. Yeah. But no, I can help you out with the surprise packages if and I can also send you, Barbara, should I send you, I don't know, did I send you the promotion?
I think you did, because I saw it.
You saw it? Yeah. So if there's something on there that is of interest, and I still have it, or I can get it, you know, let me know. Here's a nice book that I have some copies of that LeBron James and his little girl put out. And it's called I Promise. And it's just about children promising themselves that they're going to do their best around different, I promise myself I will study or, be engaged, or it has beautiful illustrations. That's one that I have for children. There's this cute little book. I have it right here. It's by Ruby Bridges, the little girl who, she's a woman now, but it's like an inspirational book for young people. This is your time. It's called. What else do I have?
Someone made a poster of that Ruby Bridges picture and added Kamala Harris walking.
Oh, next to her. Yes, I saw that online. Yeah.
This is Margaret. I'm wondering, Lynn, do you know Lori Tharps? She's a member of USG.
Yeah. Well, I don't. Yes, she came up to. She lives in Mount Airy, or
Yeah.
and she's a writer. I had a couple.
Yeah,
of books.
and she's got a podcast and she interviews authors.
Oh, okay.
And it just seems like you've got overlapping interests. And she happens to be a
actually
member of
came in the shop
USG.
once. She came in my shop once years ago, and she said, "Oh, this is what I had want," that she
Good.
That she liked it, and eventually we might have collaborated, but yeah. Yep, I do know, and I sold a couple of her titles. What else?
Well, we could take a minute. None of us introduced ourselves to you, Lynn.
Yeah.
And that question you mentioned as a possible activity around Bright April for people to talk about books that meant something to them, the way Bright April meant to Carla Hayden, the Librarian of Congress. So you just take a couple of minutes of people here to, they want to think of some book they read, particularly if it relates to African American writers.
Before I think when I said that, what I was suggesting was that true, yeah, you want to have this woman come and do this event, but a interesting program to continue to engage children in the Germantown community. That wouldn't it be great if a Germantown figure did the same thing, said, oh, this person or this book, like I can remember one of the first books I read. I don't know the specifics of it, like I couldn't say Bright April, but it was about George Washington Carver, and I read it in the 4th grade about him, and it sort of like awakened my consciousness to the idea that you're talking about. This is back in 1960 something, and early 1960s, and my consciousness just about Black people and their and what he had done in this society, and beginning to awaken in me just the stories about Black people and how they their contributions to America. If I'm a Germantown person and that's my story, then so we get a book that you purchase, that you give to the children, so that
Mm.
that satisfies them having a book in their home. And it also brings to their attention the people in their community that are, you know, how important the books were in their lives.
I mean, the world has exploded.
Her reading that book, like, just gave her a face, you know, gave her, gave her, I guess, because she lived in Germantown at the time.
No,
No.
I think she lived in North Jersey.
She lived in North
And
Jersey.
a librarian gave her the book, and it was, so she was, would have been in, at least in the 50s. I have to check her age.
Right.
And she was older. She wasn't a really little kid, but it was, you know, oh, they have a piano, we have a piano.
Right. Right. Yeah. So
But I mean,
it's just that thing about, I'm saying, you know, about having a shop with all these Black faces in it. It's really, it's empowering. That in itself is empowering.
But if you think about, I mean, what was so little existed.
That's right, at that time.
And even 60, you know, from 1946 to 1964 with Snowy Day, which we had in the
Right.
church school.
Right.
And B.B. Moore Campbell was in elementary school in the 60s. And her school library did not have a book with a person of color on the cover. She went down to the main library, got a book, brought it, did her report, and the teacher lowered her grade because she did that.
She lowered her grade.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess in fourth grade, yeah, I was, I don't know. Anyway, that's too much math.
Yeah.
But yeah, it wasn't like there was a lot of books. I had to have I found that in the library. I can remember reading it to my mother, telling, you know, because I was just so like, wow.
Yeah.
They
Well,
wasn't teaching me that it wasn't teaching me that in my school. So
60 to 64 in Philadelphia at Girls High, there was no mention or requirement of a person of color writing a book, novel, poetry, anything.
right.
But you know, somehow I found Marian Anderson's My Lord What a Morning and Jubilee, Margaret Anderson. And when my kids were little, this book called The Best Time of Day, about the father coming home from work. And yeah, there weren't them. Yeah, but it was a great book because the mother worked and it was okay. The kids didn't mind it, or the child didn't mind it.
Yeah. But no, I would like to hear, I mean, I would like to be introduced to everybody.
Yeah. Treva, you want to start?
Sure. So I'm Treva Berger. I have been reading, I mean, I remember like one of the sort of African-American book things that I remember is when I used to buy books for my kids when they were little, and didn't want to buy books all about white people all the time, that I found a great book about Noah's Ark with Black Noah and wife. And I don't know. I have a little sort of grand niece who's mixed race, and I would go to the bookstore and say, do you have any books about mixed race kids with single mothers? And they'd be like, you know, so it's really helpful now. I think there's more books now, and it's easier to find them now than it used to be, which is awesome. So thank you.
True. Mm-hmm.
I'll go next. I'm Tanika, Berkeley co-chair. I think when I was younger, the books that impacted me the most, I'm like you, like I look at covers, and so that that would really like attract me when I was a kid. And the Ezra Jack Keith's book, like Snowy Day. Like I always loved the collage work in those books and those stories. And then also the like the African folk tales, like the Anansi stories, because that was something that was just so different. Like I didn't encounter those types of like fables or things like that in my regular life, so it was always interesting and always had like a story and what is it, like a meaning kind of behind it. So those stories always attracted me.
Margaret?
I'm Margaret Thompson, and I tend to lean toward fantasy and science fiction. I'm a big fan of Octavia Butler. The most recent book of hers that I've read, which admittedly was a while ago, was Fledgling, which is very interesting
Yes, it is.
exploration of
You know, just grab
Oh.
something.
of societies.
This is her, this is, did you read hers? This is a series
Yeah.
called Seed to Harvest, and this is Wild Seed. And this is the ones that I read years ago.
Hmm.
And it, Wild Seed, Mind of My Mind, Plays Arc, and Pattern Master
Right.
are in this compilation. But yeah, Kindred, and then Kindred they did in
Yes.
a graphic novel,
Right.
which was beautiful.
My child was at Green Street Friends School when they suggested to everyone in the school to read Kindred.
Kindred, yeah. That was a good.
Yeah.
I was looking up, not everybody's picture is there, so. Rosita.
Hi, I'm Rosita Johnson, and I'm a retired primary elementary school teacher. I've been retired 27 years. It doesn't seem that long. But as a child, I never had a book with a Black character in the book that I remember, and my memory isn't the greatest. But I was, as you were speaking, I was trying to think what was my favorite book, and I just couldn't think of one. Wasn't until I was an adult that I saw books, and I remember being in 7th or 8th grade, and they had a picture of the slaves picking cotton, and we didn't want to look at that book, and we were all looking down at the floor with frowns on our faces. But things have changed. We never knew about Harriet Tubman. No, 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 no. So there are just so many wonderful books. And I have 10 great grandchildren that I have to add to their book collection.
Wow. Okay. How many children did you have?
I have 3 children, 5 grandchildren, and 10 great grandchildren.
Great.
And they all love books.
Oh, that's nice.
Thank goodness.
That's nice. Yeah.
My
Well, that's because your children loved books.
Because Rosita lived. Let's see, Deb.
Yes, hi. My name's Deb Howerton. I grew up reading books like Dr. Seuss and Black Beauty and all. I liked animal stories. But a book that just came to mind was one before I moved to Philadelphia about 4 years ago. I was looking for books to read about Philadelphia, and I ran across this might be obscure, but it's called Loving Day by Matt Johnson. And it
I
takes
have that on audio.
oh yeah, it's quite a wild ride, and I can't remember if it takes place in West Philly or
Takes place in Germantown.
Germantown. I think it's Germantown. Yeah, it was Germantown, and it's fiction,
Right.
but it was really fascinating read. And it sometimes when I walk around Germantown, I'm wondering if one of those houses he talks about that the big house he inherited from his father is a real place. But anyway, that was a book that came to mind that got me sort of intrigued about Germantown.
Wow.
Mhm.
Parvati. And then I'll go to Nancy.
I'm Parvati Menon. I'm a member of ERC. Can everybody hear me?
Mhm.
So I grew up in India, and I've been thinking about how the books I read influenced me. Growing up, we spoke in English. That was the good education. If you had a good education, you spoke in English. You read books by British, European authors or American authors. And so you read books like Kipling, which was all about, denigrating Indian people. or, and outside of that, about Black people, I remember reading Tom Sawyer, even the characters, and Huckleberry, was it Huckleberry Finn, the book?
Yep.
Uncle Tom's Cabin before that. And it's only now that I think about issues like, when you read a book, who do you identify with? So when we read these books, I know that instinctively, I don't remember how old I was, but when I read Uncle Tom's Cabin, I identified with that little girl, right? I didn't. So when I read Tom Sawyer, I identified with Tom. So that makes a difference. And the twist, I think, for me happened when I read this book. I was a teenager, probably 14 or so, and I read this book by a guy called, I think it's David something. So this is a white man who wrote a book called My Sweet Charlie. This is about a white girl getting pregnant, and they're living in a boarded house, and a young Black man helping her get food and everything. And in that story, eventually the police come and shoot the young Black man, and he dies. And this, for me, this was a big thing, because that's when it sort of, the whole thing shifted slightly. I still remember that book. It's been years and years and years, and I still remember that book, and my identifying with certain characters moved drastically from that point on. And I remember reading, what's that, Scarlett O'Hara, Gone with the Wind, and I just had this almost visceral reaction to that book, So that's my exposure to Black people growing up, because I did not grow up in the United States. That was my exposure. And when I did meet people, they were always from Africa, not When I went to college, they were from Africa, not from the United States, you know. I don't know if that was the question. I don't know what we were supposed to talk about, but it seemed like that's the general gist of it. And I thought it would be interesting for you to know that because I'm an outsider.
Thanks. And Nancy, and then Celeste.
Well, I was hunting for a book that I found when I started teaching in the 60s. I don't think I really read books that were oriented toward African Americans or about African Americans until I started teaching in the 60s. One of the books I picked up was from the Bank Street bookstore in New York when I went to take summer courses there one summer. And some of the other books were illustrated by a Philadelphia Black artist, well known, and I'm not remembering names, so I'm not helping anybody, but
Jerry Pinkney? Pinkney?
probably. Yes, one of the teachers at my the first school I taught in knew Jerry Pinkney, and she urged me to get to know him and his work. And that was poignant for me. That was a move to some different literature, and it has stuck with me, even if I couldn't remember his name. But I do remember his illustrations and his books. They were wonderful. So yes, I had the experience that someone else spoke of growing up in rural area in New England and really not being exposed much to the reality of what was happening in the African American world. And my mother loved the Rudyard Kipling books, for instance, and we got introduced to those. So whatever exposure I had wasn't really very helpful. Anyway, it's nice to be talking about it. And I do remember Ezra Jack Keats too, and his works. They're wonderful. So nice to be talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
Right, that's everybody.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
and yeah, sorry.
oh, no, it's okay. Go ahead, Trina.
I was going to say it's after 3, so we should probably wrap up.
Yeah,
That's probably what you were going to say.
Yep. See, we here. That's what it is. So thank you, Lynn. Thank you so much for joining us today, sharing your experience, sharing your work, and sharing your store, books and stuff. And so I'm just going to do the closing quote and then we'll be extinguishing the chalice. So our closing quote for today, it is by Frederick Douglass. It's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. I will now extinguish the chalice. And thank you everyone for coming out today, for joining us.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks
Thank
for having me.
Thanks, everybody.
Welcome.
Thanks.
Thank you for being with us, Lynn, and thank you all
You're
for
welcome.
putting this together.
Be in touch.
Thanks. And yeah, just reach out if there's anything particular you're interested in. If I can help you, I will.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks.
Bye.
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 Guys.